we claim it to the Catholics, but I believe many of us have our own rosary.
100%. 100%. There's a works tension. Yep. Welcome to the broadcast. This is Michael Easley in Context, and my guest today is Samuel Smadja. Samuel and I have known each other, I'm going to just roughly guess, 20 plus years, 25 plus years. He is the owner and president of the SAR-L Group, including SAR-L Tours and Conferences, SAR-L Media, SAR-L Construction. He's a regional director for TBN in Israel. He also has an IT solutions holding company and many other interests from the business standpoint. He's born in Jerusalem. He is a believer in Jesus Christ, and he plays a big role in the Christian and Messianic communities in Israel. He's an active pastor in his local church. He lives in the Judean hills near Jerusalem with his wife Susan and their adult children. For over 32 years, Samuel has been involved with SAR-L and conferences. I got to know Samuel as a tour operator, and the first time I went to Israel, Samuel greeted me at the airport along with a fleet of his buses, and we began a friendship that I have just so respected and been glad to the Lord for our friendship. Samuel, thanks for giving us some time on In Context.
Thank you, and shalom from Jerusalem.
It's
great honor.
So good to see you. Well, for those who I'm going to start with a couple things. There's many things to talk about. Obviously, the war continues as of yesterday. It's reignited. The treaty hasn't worked out as well as we'd hoped and prayed. But before we get into the conflicts, let's talk a little bit about the land, Samuel. We are familiar in theological circles with replacement theology, those who believe the church has replaced Israel. And you and I obviously have a different perspective on that the land plays a very key role in God's program. So start with that, if you would, about your perspective on, you're born there, you grew up there, it's your home, you love the people there. Talk about the land and why you think it continues to play a role in God's program.
I was born here in the country. I'm also a grandson of my grandfather was killed in Auschwitz in the Holocaust. And when we talk about replacement theology and the right of the Jewish people on the land, let me tell you one thing, Michael. If you would tell my grandfather in 1943, 1944, when he was in Auschwitz, that one day his son will be sitting in an office in Jerusalem and will be interviewed and will discuss about the right of the Jews, the return of the Jews to the land and so on, he would never believe it would never happen. So we have to understand that the return of the Jewish people to the land, and we're talking about the land, cannot be a coincidence, because nobody, even the Jewish people, never imagined that they will be back to the land. They prayed to be back to the land. They dreamed about going back to the land, but they never really believed that they would. And let's be honest, humanly speaking, a nation that was for 2,000 years, everybody was trying just to get rid of them. They were scattered all over the world. The Jews are scattered in 103 different nations. That one day a fire will be ignited in their heart, and then all of them together will say, "Let's go up to Jerusalem." That's a miracle. And before talking about the land, we should also talk about the language. It's a nation that they don't have the language. And the Jew from Iraq, the Jew from Yemen, and the Jew from Poland and Germany don't even look the same. They don't speak the same. And suddenly coming up all together back to Zion because of one thing, because they believe that God has promised them the land. And that brings us to the subject of the land. The land is not the nicest land in the world. I always say, thank God that Yeshua, that Jesus walked in this land. If not, I was unemployed, because there are better places in the world to visit and to see. Let's be honest, If it was not the Bible, if we didn't have the deed for the land would be barren. For 2,000 years, the land was barren. So the uniqueness of the land is the deed to the land, and it is the Bible. So if we separate the land from the Bible, there's no meaning for this land. Now, you'll find secular Jews and people will tell you, yeah, the return of the Jewish people, it was a result of a Zionistic movement that started, and the Zionistic movement was mainly in a secular circles. Yes, it's true, but if you study a bit deeper, the oil in this Zionistic movement was Christians who were helping the Zionistic movement. If you talk about Herzl, you know, the dreamer for the land, what we call the father of modern Zionism, all his friends were born-again Christians who told him the Jewish people have to go back to the land. There was a move of God, I believe, also among the Christian that understood that in the roadmap of God for salvation, the Jewish people need to come back to their land. And they helped and they supported and they pushed the different Zionistic movement until today. We see this happening. Yes, the Holocaust was a starter because the Jews realized we don't have a choice. But not having the choice and getting up from Yemen or getting up from Iran or getting up from Iraq and start marching towards Jerusalem, people who never saw the Holocaust, never heard the Holocaust, didn't have CNN, didn't have Fox News, didn't have internet. There was only a fire in their heart that told them, listen, you have to get up and to start walking to Jerusalem. And we see that already in the 1920, 1929, Jews are coming to Israel from different parts of the world before the Zionistic movement even started in Europe. So when we talk about the land, we talk about the deed of the land, and we cannot separate those two.
The Abrahamic covenant, to me, is where everything begins, and I'm open to your further exposition of that. But let me just read it. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country, from your relatives, from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great. And you will," literally in Hebrew and roughly in English, "you will be a blessing." It's a command. It's not, "I'm going to bless you," but you are going to be a blessing. Those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. And again in chapter 15, 17, and 19, we see, not the best word, an unfolding more of that covenant. But the land, the land and the people and the name, that was the key promise of this unilateral covenant, correct?
It is the key, and you cannot separate one from the other. The moment you separate the people of Israel, the Jewish people, from the land, that's where my opinion, you go wrong. And the return of the Jewish people to the land, we have to remember that the Messiah has to come back to the land. He's not coming back to Paris or to London or to New York. He's coming back to the land. And he's coming to a people that have to be here in the land and tell him, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is the one that come in the name of the Lord. It won't be French people who are saying that. It won't be German people who say that. It's going to be Jewish people who say that because he's talking to the Jewish people. So trying to separate the Jewish people and the land is a very hard thing.
So let me interrupt. So you and I agree on this. Our friends who don't would say, well, because they rejected the Messiah, it doesn't, that's where replacement theology, part of the stem of replacement theology comes in. And I argue the unilateral covenant aspect is what cements it. It's like the rainbow, that I'll never flood the world again. It's like the new covenant. These are unilateral, that God keeps the covenant, not man's bilateral part of the covenant, right?
So let's think. When we think about the covenant, what did Abraham do in order to get the blessings?
He was a participant. He watched.
He watched. He didn't do anything. Actually,
Right.
he was sleeping. God put him to sleep. It's what I call it. It was an unconditional covenant.
Exactly.
Abraham didn't do anything in order to inherit what he inherited. And when we look at the life of Abraham, let me tell you, if he was married to a Jewish girl from New York like I am, he would be sleeping outside with the dog after what he did. So saying that the Jewish people did not keep or didn't receive Yeshua, throughout the biblical history, we don't find a time that there was a real revival among the Jewish people, but still God chose them. When he took them out of Egypt, there was not a revival meeting before the Passover. And they all saw the light, and therefore God was convinced, okay, now they deserve to come out of Egypt. They were a nation of slaves, but God has chose them, and by his mercy and by his grace, he provided them an atonement for their sin at that time, and he took them out from Egypt. We don't see that there is a tie between the behavior of Israel when it comes to covenant. Yes, Israel will get the rain on time and all the blessing in the land according to their behavior, according to the Mosaic covenant. And it's beautiful to see that the covenant that we have in the Messiah is also a non-conditional covenant.
Right.
Because none of us was there when Yeshua was crucified here in Jerusalem. But we are receiving, that also is a non-conditional covenant. And we're getting into election, which is a very, very...
Well, and let me just say for folks, maybe some of the things we're talking about are new. When we talk about a unilateral, or as you're saying, unconditional covenant versus a bilateral covenant, a bilateral, you do your part, I do my part. If you don't do your part, I can kill you. If I don't do my part, you can kill me. But in a unilateral or unconditional covenant, God is the one who keeps the covenant. So that's why I refer to Abrahamic, Noahic. He'll never again flood the land. The new covenant, that was one that he brings into play. So just for folks, well, we're talking about something that's, it may be a little abstract and heavy, but I think it's important, Samuel, because for you and me, this is where this begins. Because apart from God's word about your people, the land, and your name, how else do we trust anything in the Scripture? How else do we trust the Word of God if He's not accurate on this covenant promise? That's all I'm trying to say. And when you hear the injection that, well, because the Jew rejected Messiah, this covenant is no longer in force, I'm going, but you're saying God is not keeping His covenant, right?
And when we read, Michael, when we read the prophecy of Ezekiel, and Ezekiel prophesied the return of the Jewish people, the prophecy of the dry bones and so on. It's interesting there that he's saying, in spite that you put my name in shame, I'm going to bring you back to the land, and he said, for my name's sake. So God is keeping his covenant with the people of Israel that he elected. That doesn't make the Jewish people better. That doesn't make the Jewish people smarter. That doesn't make the government of Israel doing everything they do right, But he's doing it for his sake. That the nation will see that the God of Israel is who he said he is. And that Israel is a tool in the hands of God to bring blessing. Look how I'm faithful to my people Israel. I'll be faithful with you if you come under the Messianic covenant, which he opened this. That's the beautiful of Jeremiah 31:31, where he opens the covenant to all nations, and Jeremiah says it's not going to be like the covenant that I did on Mount Sinai.
Right.
That it's you do good, you get good; you do bad, you get bad. It's a covenant that is depending on what God is doing and not what man is doing. So it's a totally different covenant. You have to understand. If not, there was no need for a new covenant.
Right.
So I think, if we, Jew or Gentile, the more we understand the covenants of God, the more our faith can grow. And the more we can hold fast in the salvation, no matter what we're going through. We know God was faithful with the people of Israel. God will be faithful with me. God took them from, in their impurity, he brought them back. He He will bring me back from any place I am. And there are people watching us or hearing us who are going through terrible, terrible times in their life, and they blame themselves. And they say, I'm not good enough. I didn't read enough. I didn't do enough. And it creates a guilt which is unnecessary. Not that I'm against reading enough and doing enough, but I'm against this guilt. So, and we cannot tie that. Israel did not do good enough, so therefore he cast them out. Mm-hmm. Because if he cast Israel out, what about the church today? Is the church good enough? What's good enough to stay under the covenant? How do we measure good enough?
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole problem with, we're getting into some deep weeds, but with Armenian theology, the works-based salvation, that, I have to do my part. And it's like, well, then the efficacy of what Jesus did wasn't enough. I remember years ago, Samuel, talking to a dear Catholic woman with her rosary clenched in her hand, and I asked her why she did the rosary. And she said, well, I have to atone for my sins. And I said, but Jesus paid for your sins on the cross. And she said, yes, but I must do my part.
And we claim it to the Catholics, but I believe many of us have our own rosary.
100%. 100%. There's a works tension. Yep.
We create our own rosary. We are not Catholic, but we created
You're
our
right.
own. And it's sad. It's sad. We have to preach. I think we have to preach the grace of God more than ever.
Yeah.
Because the world is becoming darker and darker. What's the hope if we don't preach the grace of God?
Yeah, I'll never be good enough to get to God, but God was good enough to come to us. Well,
Yes.
let's talk about the land now. After October 7, a indescribable horror occurs. We're now how many days into it? How many months into it now?
We're 500. Sorry for my 530 something days.
Over 500 days. And,
over 500 days, yeah.
And the losses have been horrific. Many people start somewhere with this because it's so overwhelming to me, and it's the American universities and some of the nonsense we see over here that's just it's beyond lunacy with the pro Hamas nonsense. But you live there; it's your home, your heart.
Michael, we were talking all the time. When we talk about horror, we were talking about the Holocaust. We on the 7th of October, we experienced modern day Holocaust. And Israel, we are now talking about Israel before the 6th of October or 7th of October and after the 7th of October. We are a totally different nation. Our understanding has changed. And if, we can say that before the 7th of October, there was left and right in politics. Mm-hmm. Today you have center and the extreme right. Let's be honest, the village, the kibbutz, that was the most left, who was helping Gaza more than any Jewish person or any Christian person or anybody. They had a whole system of taking children from Gaza to Israeli hospitals, old people. They were all geared in helping the Gaza Strip, this kibbutz. On the 7th of October, they were the first one to be murdered, burnt, slaughtered. And those are the people who helped the Palestinian in Gaza more than any other people. They had a system, a real system, how to help. And they were the voice. And on the 7th of October, it's like the hatred came out in a way that we didn't see since the Holocaust. And, we just celebrate the Feast of Purim.
Mm-hmm.
And we remember the story of Esther and Haman. And I never went to a Bible school, but we know that Haman came from the family of Agagi, of the Amalekites. And we remember the story where Samuel tells Saul, you have to kill all the Amalekites, and he leaves the king alive. And we see the spirit that comes from the bottom of hell, the Amalekite spirit, still coming out to attack Israel and to destroy Israel. They did it 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago in the desert, on the first exile, second exile, and we see it again. And we who read the Bible and believe in a spiritual war, we understand that it's a demonic power that just came, that was unleashed from the depth of hell to destroy Israel and to destroy the plan of God. And I believe that Israel today understood that it's not their technology and not their army. Let me back on the 7th of October. It was a disaster, and the biggest question was, where was the army?
Yeah.
Where was defense? Where was technology? We are a startup nation. We were always bragging about our technology, our army, and all those systems failed. And it was only a miracle of God that Hezbollah did not attack us on the 7th of October, that they joined into the war only on the 10th of October. If Hezbollah would attack from the north and Gaza would attack from the south, Hezbollah would fight us in Haifa. They would go all the way down. Nobody can tell you why Hezbollah did not attack on the 7th of October. So we see that the same God that protected Israel in the Feast of Purim of the book of Esther, the same God that protected Israel and took Israel from Egypt and protected them 40 years in the desert, is still protecting them in Israel today. And in spite of the army, in spite of the technology, the people of Israel are way more open to the question is, wow, maybe it's really the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that came and protected us, because it was definitely not the army. The army, sad to say, arrived to the scene. The attack was at 6:37 in the morning. The army arrived there at noon. Nobody can tell you where was the army for the 6 or 7 hours. It's a dilemma. They're fighting about it every day in the media. But I can tell you, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. Another thing that happened.
If I can interrupt for just a second, for Americans, 9/11, those of us who are old enough to experience 9/11, Pearl Harbor for our greatest generation, those pockmarks on the country, there's a longevity to them. It's shelf life, if you will. Every church in America was full the week after 9/11. Multiple services, because people were turning to God. And you do wonder, like I think of the book of Judges, the cycles of sin. And when things get bad enough, the people cry out and God sends a deliverer. And you almost wonder from a theological and historical viewpoint, Samuel, that God allows these tragedies because it is a wake-up call. Where are you in your relationship to God? Where are you in your walk with Christ? And people that are on the fence or indifferent or agnostic, it makes them wonder, why, how, what do we do? And it's a terrible connection, but you have to look at it that way, right? You can't go back and stop it. So you go forward and say, okay, Lord, what do we do?
And I think the beauty also, Israel before the 7th of October was very divided on politics, on
9/11
legal issues, the Supreme Court questions, and so on. The day the war started, people went into their car and drove south to help. It's sad to say that our system didn't work, but people opened their homes, people gave everything they could, went down, took people out from their home, took them to homes, took them to hotels. All the hotels in the country opened their doors without asking who's paying the bill, who's not paying the bill. It was just beautiful to see. In less than few hours, when the Israeli understood what's going on, everybody jumped in. People were not even called to go to the army. People just wore their uniform and went down to protect. And the sad part, you see, Michael, the war, let's be honest, Hamas is not a strong army. The only thing that allowed this war to go for so long is the fact that they have so many hostages.
Right.
Because Israel can erase the Gaza Strip in 24 hours. But because we have and we value life so much that we didn't finish this war. You know, somebody asked our Golda Meir, who was the prime minister in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, a question, and she said, and they asked her, Golda, what do you think the solution for the Middle East? So she said, we're going to continue to fight till the moment that the Arab people or the Palestinian will love their children more than they hate us.
Yeah.
It's terrible. You know, a kid calling his mom, I'm on the phone on the 7th of October, Mom, I'm on the phone. I'm in one of the kibbutzim, I murdered so many people. And she says, you're a shaheed, you deserve a place in heaven. We are talking, we are fighting, we're dealing with people who are poisoned with hatred, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, there's in the past several years, just looking at world events, even in America, you know, as a pastor all these years, I just tell people I've never used the word evil as much as I've used it the last 4 or 5 years. And there's no explanation apart. You know, when children are taught from infancy, from elementary school to hate Israel, you know, to kill the infidel, it's pretty hard to overcome.
I believe that it's more than just teaching. I think it's a spirit.
Granted, yeah.
You know, Michael, I was, you know, one time I was thinking about it. You know, you love Israel, and I believe your love to Israel, it's not the fact that you got to a conclusion that Israel did 1, 2, 3, 4, and you love Israel. I believe it's a supernatural love that God implanted in you. It's beyond loving a democratic country in the Middle East. They're democratic. You love Israel probably more than you love Denmark. They're also a democratic country, you know. Why you suddenly love Israel? Because I believe it's a supernatural love that God implanted in you. And when we think about the hatred against Israel, I believe it's a supernatural hate that it was implanted by the devil himself. Because when you ask somebody who hates Israel, and when you hear those debates, you know, I debated with different people on, you know, from the river to the sea, immediately I said, listen, there's no argument. I mean, we cannot reason the argument. We're wasting the time. I will never convince somebody who hates Israel to start loving Israel, because he's poisoned. It's not a conclusion that I'll show him 7 facts and he'll show me 5 facts and we'll get to a conclusion. There's no argument.
It's I guess it'll be a dilemma until the Lord returns.
Amen.
You say I have to correct you on one point you made about Israel not being a beautiful land. I loved Israel. The first time I landed in the Judean wilderness, you know, and for a Westerner, Samuel, when you've read these stories from childhood, maybe I came to Christ as a teenager and I consumed the scriptures and I had these pictures in mind or some picture that, you know, was in a book or whatever, but you land there and you see the Judean wilderness, you see Tel Dan, You see the Mediterranean Sea. You go to the Sea of Galilee, which is one of the most peaceful places on the planet. You see the River Jordan, which is not much of a river most of the time, but it all comes into focus for me. And for me, it was, this is the place God chose before eternity past to send his son. And then to your point, there, that is the spiritual love, because you've read about it in books, if you will. You've seen maybe film clips or now YouTube. But when you're there and it's like the Grand Canyon. You can see the best, high definition drone footage of the Grand Canyon until you stand on the south rim. You've not seen the Grand Canyon. And until you go to Israel and you go to the southern steps, or you go to Mount Arbel, or Caesarea Philippi, wherever it is, and then you read those stories, it comes to life. And so to me, it's beautiful in so many layers.
Yeah, and if I can add, I think from what I hear, it's like people tell me, Jews who come for the first time and Christian who come it's like a feeling of coming home.
Yeah.
It's like they feel that they're part of this thing.
There was a connection. First time I went, there was a connection. And I can't explain it. And I'm a pretty logical guy. Samuel Smadja is a prince of a gentleman, if you don't know. By the way, you can go to YouTube, and TBN has a almost daily news podcast. Ari Pinto is the gentleman who does a fabulous job, dear brother, and you need to watch that. You can learn from them, and you need to go to Israel. Dr. Charlie Dyer has told me many, many years ago, it is God's will for you to go to Israel. So at some point in your planning and your dreams of vacations, a trip of a lifetime, it's a safe place. No matter what people tell you, it's a safe trip. Samuel will take care of you when you arrive. Any final words, my friend, about encouraging folks to visit the land?
First of all, I think although the time we're going through, Israel is safer today than before the 7th of October. The Middle East has changed. I don't know if people realize what's happened in the last 18 months. It's not the same Middle East. Evil power are eliminating. In the north, Hezbollah, Lebanon is a new country, has a new government. Hezbollah is out. Syria doesn't exist. Iran doesn't have the power that they have. And with Iran, we didn't. The story is not finished. I believe we'll see things happening in the very near future. Hamas is gone. Hamas is not existing as a military. And I believe that the Abraham Accord has gone. We're going to see the Abraham Accord even advancing. We're going to see Saudi Arabia coming into the table. We're going to see countries like Indonesia, Malaysia building a relationship with Israel. I believe that, humanly speaking, the Middle East and Israel will be entering into a prosperity after this time.
Well, that's an encouraging thought to pray for all of us. And again, my brother, thank you so much. It's always truly a delight whether I run into you in the States or when I come and embrace you in your home. And you've just been a great friend and brother, and love you and appreciate you so much, sir.
Thank you. Great honor, and shalom from Jerusalem to everybody.